And I'm going to reduce. So I don't see either of us now.
Okay, we are live now. Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Sarah. I am the nutrition consultant for Choices Markets at 3 locations in North Vancouver, Kerrisdale, and Canby. Tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, RoseMarie, our guest speaker for tonight. RoseMarie Pierce has earned her Bachelor of Science degree in pharmacy from Dalhousie University in 1972. She has done extensive studies in herbal and nutritional medicine. She has been recognized as one of Canada's foremost integrated health spokespeople. Welcome, RoseMarie. Before to start our webinar tonight, I'm going over a few housekeeping items. First, those that who are attended in this webinar, you are eligible to receive a coupon that we call it nutrition box. This coupon is $10 off when you purchase $50 or more at Choices Market. And at the end of this webinar, you will get a link, a survey link, and that is that you need to fill it out, your mailing address, and then the nutrition box will be mailed to you approximately 30 days after this webinar. And second, if you have nutrition question, you can visit one of our local choices and talk to one of our nutritionists at the store, or email at nutrition@choicesmarkets.com. During this presentation, if you have a question, you can just enter it in chat box, and those will be answered at the end of this presentation. And in order to enter your question in chat box, you need to sign up your YouTube account and then or create one if you don't have one. And this webinar will be on YouTube, and you can watch it again anytime. Okay, so welcome, RoseMarie. And now I think give it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be with you and to share information on what I consider a very, very important part of a health regimen that can support you for your life, and that would be enzymes. We're going to talk about both enzymes that are naturally produced by the body and how do we supplement with enzymes to support our digestion and the value that we get out of our food. It's one thing to eat really healthy food, but is it ending up in your toilet? Is it being digested? Are you able to extract all of the nutrients from your food? So given that food is one of the most important things that we have in our life to nourish us and to create a healthy body, then optimum digestion is very important. Let's take a look at the benefits of having a healthy digestive system. And that is, it's going to protect the small intestine lining from damage and inflammation. One of the things that we do know is that if we have inflammation and damage, we have leaky gut. And once we have a leaky gut, then we have lots of crossing between what's in the digestive tract into our bloodstream. That could be partially digested proteins that trigger the immune system. It could be a gluten molecule, which can then get into the brain. Many things can happen if we don't have proper digestion and then healthy lining of our small and large intestine. Oops, let's just go back forward. Also, healthy digestion is going to give us the best absorption of nutrients. Our nutrients are absorbed through the small intestine for the most part. Almost nothing except drugs and alcohol will get to us through the stomach. So it is below the stomach where our absorption is. It's also really important with a healthy digestion that we control bacterial overgrowth, or infections can be prevented with a healthy digestive system. It protects us against allergens, lactose intolerance. Not everybody is born with a lactose intolerance. It's often developed due to a poor digestive system. Also, the removing of waste, because there are a lot of toxins that end up needing to be carried out in the fecal matter. And if we're constipated, if our digestion's not healthy, they're not going to get removed. And it can even contribute towards estrogen dominance. Matter of fact, many times when I've been dealing with females who can't get rid of the extra estrogen, it's been overlooked that they're chronically constipated. Change the constipation can make all the difference in reducing their estrogen dominance, PMS, perimenopausal symptoms. The other thing is our alkaline minerals. If we do not have good digestion, if it's incomplete, we're not going to be absorbing, we're not going to be ionizing and absorbing our alkaline minerals, and that means we could possibly have a huge issue with not being able to neutralize acids in our internal body, and therefore cannot keep our body properly pH balanced. And that causes a huge amount of internal issues, which, just to give you one, would be osteoporosis, for example. Okay, I'll bring that up along the way because that's also one of my topics that I specialize in, is pH balancing. Let's take a look at facts about poor digestion. Oh, I hope you like my frogs. I absolutely think these little guys are very cute, and I'm sure a lot of people have felt the way this guy does. So the NIH, the National Institute of Health, says that there are 70 million Americans, and we can extrapolate that into Canada, given that we're about 10% of their population, to most likely about 7 million Canadians experience digestive disorders. Odor gas, which is methane gas, is often from undigested proteins. Up to 1 in 4 people have lactose intolerance, and not all of them are born with that. The body does not produce fiber digesting enzymes. We're going to look at that as we go into enzyme supplements and how fiber digesting enzymes can support our body. This would be the person that, if they took a look in the toilet, might see undigested chunks of carrot. Nuts and seeds are big ones. If they're not chewed, they're just not going to be broken down. The fiber's too tough. Muscle spasms, headaches, especially headaches through the right eye, muscle spasms in the shoulder, stiff neck, often can do with a spastic colon or liver issues, especially with the enzyme lipase. We're going to look at lipase, this fat digesting enzyme, quite a bit more. Also, it's well known now that many people taking omega-3 oils, DHA, EPA, for example, in supplement form, they don't absorb them. We'll look more into that. And then there's another type of gas. Oh, I can see. Should say the non-odorous kind, which is hydrogen gas. So just make note that this should be the non. The odorous gas is usually methane, and the non-odorless gas is hydrogen gas, H2. And it's often produced due to low carbohydrate digesting enzymes available, or eating too many carbohydrates and your body not being able to digest them. So let's take a look now at enzymes and what they are. First of all, this is an enzyme structure. Being a pharmacist, that's my training is pharmacy. I practiced as a licensed pharmacist for 25 years or so, and have been doing holistic medicine for almost 50 now. I love to look at chemicals. So all you have to do is think about this as a protein structure, a globular, rounded protein structure. That's what enzymes are made of. And there are also minerals. These little dots in here are minerals. It always takes a mineral as a cofactor. But this enzyme structure, which is made of protein, and the protein is folded into these complicated shapes, what it does is it generates chemical reactions. Chemical reactions would not be able to occur if we didn't have this activator, this catalyst. And so what it's doing for the most part is making chemical reactions occur very fast. And we need, in our internal body, we need these chemical reactions for our metabolism, which is everything that builds up our body and then breaks it down, building up internal proteins, for example, and breaking down and allowing the body to excrete dead proteins. So it also makes all of our neurotransmitters, all of our biochemical reactions occur because of enzymes internally. And they're also available for digestion. We're going to break down enzymes in just a minute. So how do these enzymes work? Well, they kind of act like a way to think of them as tiny scissors. I've got this little figure here. If we imagine that these were amino acids joined together like pearls in a chain of pearls, then what a enzyme is going to do is come in here and just clip off this little joint, freeing hopefully every one of these links and making free amino acid molecules, which then can be absorbed. We cannot absorb these, our macronutrients, our fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, when they're in this complex form. They need to be broken down to their very small building blocks. And in our digestive system, that's what digestive enzymes do. So imagine this molecule being that small and being able to get in there and break down our large particles of our food. So enzymes are naturally found in raw food. This is where they are. So if we were taking in raw food, they would be activated by the heat and moisture found in our stomach, and they would contribute enzymes to breaking down the foods that they're found in. There are a few of our foods that have a lot of enzymes, like pineapple, papaya, and kiwi. They contain more enzymes, but really not enough to digest a meal. And they would have to be extremely fresh, almost taken right out of the ground, for example, in a tropical climate, to get high amounts of enzymes. So normally we find enzymes in fresh fruits and vegetables, also sprouted and fermented food. This is what we consider live food. So when food is exposed to cooking, radiation, or processing in the form of wet heat, it's 118 degrees. Now, water boils at 100, at 120 20 degrees. I believe it is. I'm just trying to remember. I've been looking at so many different temperatures recently. So wet heat is 118. If it if the water that if you put your finger in water and it was just below 118 degrees, it would not harm it. It would not burn it, but it will burn at 118, and that's a good indication. If your flesh is going to burn, you're also going to remove the enzymes from food, and that's a wet heat. Enzymes also will be lessened in food when it's stored long term, when it's shipped. So of course, the most enzymatically active food is going to be the food that you take right out of your garden and eat immediately. And so once it's shipped and stored and crosses borders and it's irradiated, if it's been sprayed with pesticides, preserved, or exposed to other toxins, it's not going to be high enzymatic food. And matter of fact, there's a lot of really enzymatic dead food, all your processed food down basically the middle of the aisles. And this food needs us to contribute enzymes to its digestion. And that puts a burden on our organs and our pancreas, where these enzymes have to come from in order to break down the food. Next to flight or fight, in other words, preserving ourselves from death, the next most important thing is nourishment. So our body spends a lot of energy in making enzymes to make sure, if they're not available in food, that the body can contribute. And therein lies the issue, because eventually the body isn't able to do that. It runs out of raw materials, which are proteins, to make enzymes, and it doesn't have enough energy to make as many enzymes as we need. Now, let's look at, if our body's not doing that, what kind of signs of deficiency we will have. Well, this little guy, I think, really exemplifies that. He's constipated. So signs of enzyme deficiency are bloating, belching, gas, bowel disorders in general, cramping, heartburn, and food allergies, especially food allergies that you didn't have from birth. So obviously a peanut allergy is something different than an allergy that you might have gained to, let's say, pickles. Now you can't eat pickles when you used to be able to eat them, or any food. That's could be tied in with enzyme deficiency. But it's this chronic constipation. And the reason for that is, once a person increases their fiber, so that, and they increase their water, because those are obviously the two first things that we would go to be sure that we have enough hydration and lightness to break up stool. But next, after that, often it doesn't work because there's undigested food. All we have to do is think about, if we took flour and mixed it with water, what do we get? It's paste, right? And that's what happens with undigested proteins and carbohydrates. And of course, the grains made into flours are the worst ones of the carbohydrates. But protein can do this. And it will cause an issue, protein if you're eating a copious amounts. And often the person will do that would be an athlete who's maybe having 5 meals, high protein meals per day. I often see them constipated, and we'll talk about solutions for that. Other signs are the headaches, back and neck and shoulder stiffness that I talked about, which is related to fat digestion and the health of the gallbladder liver system. Chronic fatigue, yeast infections. We'll look at stomach acid, especially with these, and nutritional deficiencies. If you're not breaking down your food, you can't release the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals, for example. that are found within those foods. And then slow recovery from injury. This one is tied, often correlated with low levels of zinc, and with low levels of hydrochloric acid, stomach acid, often there's the zinc deficiency, because zinc needs stomach acid, as do all minerals, but there's a big correlation there. These are just two books that are very good: Enzyme Nutrition by Dr. Howell and Enzyme Therapy by Dr. Chico. Okay, let's go and take a look at the different types of enzymes. This is a general enzyme, just a typical enzyme. And there are, of these, there are 22 different types of digestive enzymes. They're excreted along the digestive tract. Matter of fact, they start in the saliva. It's one of the reasons to, as your mother said, chew your food well, because it mixes with saliva and you have certain enzymes, mainly carbohydrate digesting. A saliva amylase is in there, but also even some lipase can show up in the saliva. So you want to start to produce these enzymes in your mouth. Some of them will be produced in the stomach. Most are in the small intestine or coming from the pancreatic juices, and the bile juices are going to produce those enzymes. So these digestive enzymes only work within the digestive tract, which is a tube running through the body. But there are other enzymes, and there are thousands of varieties of these, called metabolic enzymes. These enzymes are found in the body, and when they're in the body, they take care of the functions in the body, and one of those would be to break down dead proteins. And we're going to look at how we can support these metabolic enzymes by making sure that we have enough digestive enzymes, and then the body can focus on production of enzymes for its internal body needs. And remember, these are speeding up the enzyme reactions. Now, the enzyme levels can be affected by, as I said earlier, the enzyme deficient diet, where there's not enough raw food. If a person ate 60 to 80% raw food, they probably wouldn't have enzyme deficiencies. We just do not do that. It's not practical for us most of the times. Often, especially as we age, it's very difficult, and most people do not have that high of a raw food diet. So eventually we run out of the ability to produce these enzymes. If our body has a low body pH, in other words, we're acid, we have acidosis, that can reduce enzymes. Chemotherapy really affects the lining of the whole digestive tract and affects enzymes. Stress, remember, is priority, because it's stress and worry and anxiety. All types of stress are going to be seen as priority, and energy is going to go away from digestion and into brain and muscle power. Age, this is a big one. With age, the ability to produce enough digestive enzymes really decreases. And if a person has digestive issues like IBS or celiac disease, or low stomach acid, food intolerances. So all of those can play. As a matter of fact, I've discovered there's a huge correlation between being a celiac or highly gluten sensitive and low stomach acid, along with liver and gallbladder issues. That seems to run all together. If you know somebody who has high gluten intolerance, just find out about whether they have liver issues as well and gallbladder issues. Okay, let's look at how we can help the body with an all-purpose enzyme. Now, an all-purpose enzyme is going to digest protein, and it's going to do it within a wide range of pH. I've given you a range of what we're looking for in the units of activity, these FCC, and for protease, we really want them in HUT units, and between 50,000 would do an average meal. If you're eating the turkey dinner with all the trimmings, you might want to increase it, but this is kind of your range for total amount of HUT protease units. Papain extracts and bromelain, this is from papaya, from pineapple, also are really helpful. This is one of the protease enzymes. I've just given you little examples. I thought it might just brighten things up to kind of see how they depict these protein enzyme molecules. And here you can see the cofactor minerals. They're hidden in this one. Now, besides protein digestion, we also need to digest carbohydrates. And if you're getting a good all-purpose enzyme for carbohydrate digestion, you want to have these five different types, but the main one is the amylase, which starts and breaks down most of our starches and carbohydrates, including the grains and sweet potatoes, things like that. And you want it in a range of 11 to 20,000 DUs. This is the activity units. We're not interested in milligrams, but in activity units, because milligrams do not always equal activity units. So it's how active are these enzymes? And these are going to break down everything, including legumes and beans. This alpha galactosidase is what breaks down beans. Of course, the lactase will break down lactose. This will take complex double sugars and break it down. So you want a variety, but what I've emphasized is the main two that you need very potent, which is the protease and the amylase. Now let's take a look at the third one that breaks down fat. Fat digestion is done by lipase. It'll either be in FIP units, or in Canada now, it's mostly in the FCC-LU. This is a sort of a standardization, and this LU in this case stands for lipase units, and they should be between 500 and 1,000. Remember, these activity units, it's not comparing apples to apples between different FCC units. So even though the HUTs we want to be 100,000 up to it in potency, it's probably quite similar to these 1,000 of the LUs. It's a kind of a difficult thing to sort out unless you're a biochemist, but take my word for it. This would give you adequate digestion for a regular meal with a regular amount of fat in it. It's not enough for a high fat keto type meal, which we'll talk about. So it's breaking down fats. What I want to show you is how that is done. This is an omega-3 fat. And as you can see, it's quite complicated. It's got a glycerol base, and it's got 3 fatty acids. This could be DHA, EPA, LA, these different fatty acids, but we can't absorb this in this complex. What our body will do, an enzyme will come in here and break off this triglyceride. Mostly it breaks off 2 of them and just leaves a monoglyceride and fatty acids. Now we can take these through the lining of our small intestine and be able to absorb our fats. But a person has to have enough lipase enzyme being produced by the pancreas to do that. If we don't, adding extra lipase can really support our body in breaking down that fat. And it will also help us absorb our fat-soluble vitamins and nutrients like lutein. And it also helps us because this enzyme is also found in our fat tissue. And when we are going through, let's say, intermittent fasting or a fast, and our body wants to take energy from our fat cells, it uses this enzyme. So we find this enzyme also in our fat cells. And this is what it looks like. Okay, let's take a look at a last category that you can find in good all-purpose plant-based digestive enzymes, and that's fiber digesting enzymes. And there are 6 of them that help us break down complicated fiber. And where is my fiber? Here it is. This is a cross-section of celery. If we were looking at all those compartments in celery, and we know how hard it is to chew and break down celery, unless you've got a high-speed blender, a Blendtec or Vitamix or whatever, you're not going to break these cellulose compartments down and get all of the nutrients that are in these compartments along with the water. And this is where fiber digesting enzymes can benefit. So we break down the cellulose walls, we release the nutrients, and it helps our body to get more efficiency from our fiber foods. Somebody who is maybe even taking in a lot of raw food, if they're not able to chew it properly or blend it, then a lot of their nutrients could be lost. So it helps us to not have as much gas and bloating also from fiber vegetables, for example. And it helps us absorb nutrients, especially minerals, from our foods. So let's take a look at what a digestive enzyme can do for us. So first of all, it's going to help us get energy from those carbohydrates. You have to break them down into simple sugars to absorb them. And then if you're using carbohydrates as your energy fuel, then you will be able to get the simple sugars out of them. Also, with protein, it's going to increase the amount of value we get out of it, especially with the protein. It's going to improve those amino acid absorptions, increase our nitrogen retention, and build muscle for those ones that are called hard gainers, which means they can't put on weight, especially muscle. And it supports all athletes. An athlete going for a either vegan or whey protein supplement often will have gas and bloating. If they take an all-purpose digestive enzyme, plant-based digestive enzyme in this case, they will find that they're going to get less gas and bloating, less constipation, and more nutrients, more proteins out of those foods. It can improve digestion and elimination and your all-over bowel health. It supports the immune system, remembering that about 70% of our immune cells are found just inside the one cell lining of our whole digestive tract. And they're there mostly in the intestinal system, the small and large intestine, to protect us. So are these immune cells, if our body is not digesting properly and we're producing toxins and inflammation in our lining, it's going to break the integrity, and our immune system is going to be overactive and go out of whack. Also, it supports the healthy fat to muscle ratio, and it helps slows the aging and influences our all over health. Now, how it influences our all over health is that if we're taking digestive enzymes, which by the way, they're not on a feedback loop. So the question I get asked most often is, if you take digestive enzymes for too long, does that mean your body won't produce them? And no, it's not like taking cortisone or sex hormones where you actually shut down your own hormones. Enzymes do not work on a feedback loop. What it does is it helps you get nutrients out of your food. And enzymes should never hurt the body. If there's any pain from taking an enzyme, then a person should absolutely stop. Enzymes can be mixed right in with food just before you eat it. You always start to eat with a plant-based enzyme. You always start to eat, and as soon as you start, take your enzymes, or at least within the first hour, so that they can contribute to breaking down your food before it leaves the stomach. So you want to get your enzymes in there. And when we're contributing these enzymes, the body then can focus on producing those metabolic enzymes and keeping our internal body healthy. Okay, let's take a look at who can need a anybody who wants to break down a large meal, especially if they are going out and having a large meal or cooking a large meal at home, which is typical these days. And certain meals, especially if they eat too much, really make them feel bad. And anybody who's taking acid-reducing medication and getting gas and bloating and heartburn can use a digestive enzyme. They can't use betaine HCl when they're on acid-reducing medications, PPIs, or the over-the-counter Zantac type medications, or even regular use of antacids. But you can use digestive enzymes, and it can help you reduce indigestion and the heaviness in the gut after eating. Anybody with constipation, IBS, inflammation, leaky gut, or reflux can take digestive enzymes, and it would really help them to get more nutrients out of their food and take more stress off their system. If you want to unlock nutrients to gain muscle, for energy, fuel, athletes on a high protein diet, or anyone who wants to promote their digestive system and good all over health. Now, do you need to take enzymes all the time? No, you might just take them at certain meals when you feel as if, oh, this is the type of meal that I don't digest well. I remember being in a health food store once, and I was doing a presentation in the store, and one of the staff had gone for her lunch, and she had ordered pizza. And I just asked her, I said, do you ever have trouble with that pizza? She said, I can have one piece without a problem, but after two, I'm in trouble. I said, just try taking a digestive enzyme. And I handed her a couple. And she did. And by the time I finished my presentation, I asked her, and she said, no problem. I was able to eat the whole thing. So it can be quite amazing, and it's often right away. But you don't have to take them at every meal. You could just take them with meals that don't feel good, or when you know you're going to have that very large meal. Or you can take them regularly for a while and then stop taking them and see how you feel. Digestive enzymes for athletes. I just want to touch on this very briefly, because food takes a lot of energy to digest. And if you're an athlete, you're looking for the energy from your food, and you can support it by using digestive enzymes, which will decrease and conserve energy. It's also going to release those micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals that you're looking for from our macronutrients, the proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Also, it's going to increase the amino acid levels found in the body, especially the branched chain amino acids that help to repair muscle. And this nitrogen retention is really important. It means if you're breaking down more muscle than you're creating, then you're going to lose nitrogen, and you'll be in a catabolic state. What we want is to always keep the body building up, and that's an anabolic state. Let's move on, because I'd like to spend some time with stomach acid. And here's a picture of our stomach, and the valve on top of the stomach is called a sphincter, lower esophagus sphincter, and it closes and stops acid from backing up into the esophagus. And it's underneath the diaphragm. Sometimes, for different reasons, pregnancy is one of them, the stomach gets pushed up And this LES sphincter, this valve gets open, and we have acid reflux or stomach content reflux. So this is the main issue when people have acidy burps, or they feel that acid just above their diaphragm, just on the bottom of their ribs sort of area. And this is often what sends them to the doctor to get an acid reducing medication. But oftentimes it isn't that they have too much acid, it's that they have that open valve. So let's look at just how important this stomach acid is before we decide to neutralize it. Now, obviously, if there's burning, we do not want to leave acid on the esophagus, causing ulcers or burning our tender esophageal tissue. The stomach has protection, but the esophagus tube does not. So we want to have good stomach acid, at the same time not put ourselves in danger of high inflammation in the esophagus. So let's take a look, first of all, at what stomach acid does, how important it is. So it liquefies the stomach contents, creating a chyme. It denatures proteins. Now, most proteins are those folded globular, that's how protein comes into our body. And this high acid level, which reaches a 1 to 3 pH. Now, if you put your finger in 1 to 3 pH hydrochloric acid, which is stomach acid, it would burn it off. So the stomach itself is protected from that. And when protein comes down, it opens up. And now those digestive enzymes can get in there and break off the pearls in the chain of pearls, or the amino acids in the protein chain. It also, when the stomach acid goes to those levels of a 1 to 3 pH, which is a high amount of acid, it activates an enzyme called pepsin, which assists in digesting protein. So that's the first two aspects of breaking down our protein, is to have enough stomach acid. Really important, I've really marked this one, is we have to have a pH of 1 to 3 in our stomach acid to encourage our bile to be produced and our pancreatic juices. If we do not have this good level of stomach acid, then a 1 to 3 pH, then the message does not go down to the gallbladder liver system, whether you have a gallbladder or not, and the pancreas to say, we need to bring in these juices that also contain buffering agents to buffer that acid and bring the pH up to neutral, slightly alkaline, and also contribute bile and contribute enzymes from the pancreas, from the pancreatic enzymes, from the pancreatic juice. So this is so important. If a person is taking an acid-reducing medication, a PPI, or some of the ones, they're called H2 antagonists, both of these can be found over the counter, and some of them are prescription. If you're taking one of these every day, the amount of stomach acid that you can produce will not get the pH below 4. If you have issues and you need your pH to be neutralized like that and not produce enough hydrochloric acid to get the pH down to that 1 or 3, that's fine. But these drugs were never meant for long-term use because we need stomach acid. Here are some other ways in which we use it. We use it to ionize the minerals found in our food and from our supplements so that we can absorb them. We can't absorb mineral salts. We have to absorb them as ions. And also you have to prepare certain nutrients like the folate and the ascorbic acid or vitamin C, beta carotene. And most people know about low stomach acid can produce a vitamin B12 deficiency. Another really big use for stomach acid is to sterilize our stomach, so that as we ingest microbes, whether it be bacteria, viruses, yeast, they can be sterilized and therefore not produce overgrowth that can affect our immunity, and also to prevent these overgrowths from both coming down through our stomach. We know that even viruses and coronaviruses can come in through swallowing from the back of our respiratory system and bring them in. If we had stomach acid, we could neutralize those. Okay, let's take a look at overproduction and underproduction. Both can cause these symptoms, the heartburn, the indigestion. And remember, because it can be just the valve that's opened right here on the top of the stomach. And oftentimes when it's checked, it's usually the research is verifying that obesity is almost never the issue, especially for those people over 35. It is possible to have too high a stomach acid, but it's rare in most people. And there's a great book Dr. Jonathan Wright wrote on why stomach acid is good for you. This is one of the few doctors that have really spoken out to explain how important stomach acid is. So here's some signs. Take this poor guy. He has low stomach acid. So if you get bloating and distension, especially immediately after a meal, along with burps, because those burps mean that valve is most likely open. Indigestion, heartburn, diarrhea. Here's another important one: a prolonged sense of fullness long after eating. So you shouldn't feel full 2 or 3 hours after, and you still do. Multiple food sensitivities. Remember, food's not being sterilized, and it's most likely that the food's not able to be broken down properly. Nausea, taking supplements, deficiencies of iron, calcium, and other minerals. And remember, the zinc is another one in there. Acne and rosacea and blood vessels in the nose. Often this can be a bacterial or microbe overload in the body that comes from not having enough stomach acid to sterilize stomach content. And it could include, the biggest one, which I've underlined, is Helicobacter pylori infection. So an H. pylori infection always accompanies low stomach acid. A chronic candida. This is another one, a yeast infections. You might go through a whole yeasting program to kill off your yeast, but your stomach acid's so low that every time you're eating foods, not able to keep all forms of yeast out of your diet. It's pretty hard to do that. You could be reintroducing them again. Or even intestinal parasites. Rectal itching is another sign of a high overload of pathogens or parasites. And I put in here hair loss for women and poor quality nails. So when nails are split, hair splits, or there's hair loss, that can very well be a mineral deficiency caused from low stomach acid. So let's take a look at what can help. What can help is a hydrochloric acid supplement. Betaine HCl is the typical one you'll find. You want to make sure it's plant-based and not animal-sourced in this case. The betaine would come from it's called trimethylglycine, and actually here it is as a little molecule, and it's combined with hydrochloric acid, and that protects the hydrochloric acid so it won't hurt the upper part of your digestive system as you're swallowing. Usually I would say don't buy one with pepsin in it. Pepsin is derived from animal intestines, and I've never seen an indication that it needs to be in an HCl formula. You want to make sure you get a good smelling one. Sometimes they can be pretty rank and smelling because of this nitrogen. Some of it gets free here. So, you can find them in pure vegetable capsules, totally vegan, non-GMO, gluten-free. So here's the trimethylglycine, which is a natural compound found in beets. It's also a methylation agent with 3 methyl groups around a nitrogen and this carbon tail here, plus hydrochloric acid. Put these two together and you have this wonderful betaine HCl, which is both going to help your increase your hydrochloric acid, but also provide these the glycine and these wonderful methane groups. Let's look at who can benefit from it. So first of all, how are you going to know if you have inadequate or impaired gastric secretion? So what I've put together and you can get from me are 2 tests. These are kind of home do-it-yourself tests that you can try, and they're very simple, especially the first one. It's called the burp test, and this can tell you if and this isn't the type of burps that happen when you eat food, because you're using this baking soda combination and doing it every day. And I've got all the instructions for you to see if you're burping. And if you don't burp, you're not producing hydrochloric acid. And then you could go on and try the betaine HCl test to see if betaine HCl will help you, as long as you do not have a stomach ulcer or what's called gastritis, which is inflammation of the lining. You could have a stomach ulcer and gastritis and still have low hydrochloric acid. So you could do the burp test and go, wow, my stomach acid's low, but I've got to heal the lining first, because when I try to take betaine HCl, I can't do it. So, but if there's no burning or warmth created by taking 1 betaine HCl, you can carry on with that test as I have laid it out for you. And this is one thing for sure that you can use, build up, and then decrease and build your own hydrochloric acid back again. And that's a nice thing to know, that you don't always have to take a betaine HCl substance. Maybe under stress, you might go back to taking it. Or if you're fighting an infection, it can be really helpful. If you have an overgrowth of fungus or bacteria, any type of skin conditions that can't be easily dealt with, especially if there's infection or acne. If you have osteoporosis, that's really involved with your pH of your internal body fluids. But if you can't get that pH up to the proper scale, and if you're interested, I'm going to give you a link to my website so you can look at articles on pH and osteoporosis. But if you can't get that pH up to where you want it, maybe it's because you don't have enough stomach acid. And that could be causing your iron deficiency, and it could be affecting intestinal permeability. Or, as I said, if you have gluten and dairy intolerance, often there's low stomach acid combined with that. Seniors, this is a big thing, because the older we are, seems to be a direct correlation, excuse me, to not producing enough stomach acid. And it particularly affects our vitamin Bs and our minerals. So you can use ionic liquids, ionic solutions, which are liquids that don't need preparation to have stomach acid. So those are available in almost, Choices carry these ionic solutions. You can find them in health food stores, good health food stores like Choices, that can support you in taking these, and they're taken on an empty stomach because they're already prepared and do not need stomach acid. Really good for elderly people with mineral deficiencies, iron deficiencies, and Bs. And also as I said earlier, for those who consistently can't get away from an acidic pH. And also, if you have pancreas and gallbladder issues, it could be because of low stomach acid, and that's really worth looking into. Okay, so remember at the end of my talk, I'm going to give you my link tree so that you can go and be able to get these two stomach acid tests. Let's move on. And I would just like to bring up a combination of taking an all-purpose enzyme. Enzyme force happens to be Prairie Naturals, but I've given you the stipulations to make sure that you have a good all-purpose enzyme. But if you combine an enzyme like enzyme force with betaine HCl, it can help your acid reflux and your GERD by digesting the carbs that create the hydrogen gas. And just as little as 1/2 of a small muffin, not one of those giant muffins, a small muffin can produce 10 liters of gas. That's the kind of gas that rolls right through you and it doesn't have odor, or it really puffs out and you have to loosen your pants or the belt. So this gas puts pressure on the stomach and pushes the stomach up, just the way being pregnant does. when you put an 8-pound baby there, the stomach is misplaced and it comes up, and almost every female has some form of heartburn because the stomach is pushed up. Well, that gas does the same thing. So by using a digestive enzyme, reducing your carbohydrates is a good idea. And also using carbohydrate digesting enzymes in a good all-purpose enzyme will help that. And then if you are not on acid-reducing medications, you could take betaine HCl to decrease the bacterial overgrowth, which is causing you to produce these bacteria that are producing the gas. So that combination can really reduce the acid reflux, or GERD as it's often called. Let's take a look at another issue that can happen, and that's challenges with fat digestion. So fat digestion issues can happen if you're just eating the occasional really fatty meal, going out for Chinese food, for example. If you have liver gallbladder issues or you don't have a gallbladder, this is really important for people who don't have a gallbladder, or if you're starting a high-fat ketogenic type diet. All of these either occasionally or frequently would need to use fat digesting enzymes. Now, as I expressed, there are two parts to fat digestion. One is the lipase produced in the pancreas. But before that, we have to have a good amount of bile to emulsify our fats. And when we emulsify fats, we break them down into small fat globules that then that lipase enzyme from the pancreas can come in and break down our fats, as I showed you when we looked at the lipase breaking down the omega-3 fats. So breaking down fats is a huge issue. If you happen to have one of these conditions, such as no gallbladder or eating a lot of fats because you're on a high-fat diet, you would need extra type of fat digesting enzymes. And the reason people have this issue is because they often will have insufficiency of bile or lipase being produced. And that could be through age, through bile and pancreatic low enzyme production. You could be chronically sluggish pancreas or gallbladder liver system. Also, if you eat too many cooked, heavy processed foods or gluten-containing foods, you put a burden on these enzymes, and sometimes it's inflammation. So gallbladder issues or inflammation in the pancreas can cause obstruction, and you don't get these juices coming in. Or remember, the low hydrochloric acid can do it as well. So I am a formulator for enzymes, and this is just a general kind of formula you would be looking for if you want to digest fat. And unfortunately, you cannot get this in a vegan form. There's no bile salts that are produced that are not extracted from ox bile. the thing to be sure is that I've done in formulating this enzyme is to make sure this is USDA certified, made in the US. Most bile salts come from Mexico or China. And so it took me a long time to make sure I had a guaranteed source from the US. Same with the pancreatic bovine enzymes. You want these pancreatic enzymes to also be from a really pure source and high in lipase. So I've added this plant-based lipase and a lipase from the pancreatin. Given that lipase is found in different pHs, the more of this, the better to break down fats and our fat-soluble nutrients, especially helps omega-3 fats. So you would usually take this type of enzyme. By the way, I didn't talk about how to take hydrochloric acid because it's within that betaine HCl test. It explains how to figure out how much to take. But for a fat digesting enzyme with this amount, say 50 milligrams of the bile, you would take 2 capsules once or twice a day with meals that have fat in them. Always when you're taking ox bile, keep your fluids high and keep it away from medications by a few hours. So fat digesting enzymes are going to help with that fullness and bloating after a fatty meal, or when you're especially starting a keto diet, because you're not used to handling that much fat. Also, if the lipase low production is coming from the pancreas. But one of the biggest advantages to this is that when we break down our fats and digest our fats with the bile and the lipase enzyme, we also then allow them to be absorbed and carry in, and that's when we take in our fat-soluble nutrients, our vitamin A, D, E, K, things like astaxanthin, lutein for the eyes, and our omega oils all get taken in at the same time. One of the things, if you've listened to many of my talks, I always talk about taking your vitamins, almost all of your vitamins, especially your minerals and fat-soluble vitamins, with a meal with fat in it. You need that fat starting in the tongue, so you have to have it outside of a capsule to start the whole digestion of fat and to get that absorption happening. Also helps to maintain healthy cholesterol levels, supports the liver and gallbladder, and provides these much needed fats for our brain and eye health. Okay, let's take a look at one more enzyme very quickly. And this enzyme is an internal enzyme that we take on an empty stomach, and it's called serrapeptase or serratiopeptase. And it's an important, very potent anti-inflammatory enzyme that we want to get past our stomach acid and get absorbed intact in our small intestine, in the upper part of our small intestine, to support our metabolic enzymes. So this is called a systemic enzyme therapy, and it supports the internal body enzymes. It dissolves protein, maybe from scars or after an injury. It was originally found in the silkworm, developed in Japan over 40 years ago, used in Asia and in Europe in replacement of anti-inflammatory drugs. No longer is the silkworm involved. It's made on a non-GMO base, just cultivated in a lab. It has to be enteric coated to protect it from the stomach. You can get it, it's vegan. You could get it gluten-free in a vegetable capsule. And you always take it on an empty stomach, get it to pass through the stomach and absorb in the intestine. Now, what is it going to do? Well, this is fibrin, this net-like over these white blood cells. This is a microscopic view of white blood cells, and this is fibrin, which forms a blood clot. Now, we don't want our cells to be, our red blood cells to be stuck together or to have blood clots unless we have a wound. So if you have a wound, you don't want to be, or tooth extraction, especially a vascular surgery or something, you don't want to be taking an enzyme that's going to break down your blood clots. But generally speaking, that's helpful. So it acts as an anti-inflammatory, alternatives to the NSAIDs. And it doesn't have the side effects. It doesn't create ulcers or liver damage or bleeding. No, it doesn't affect the kidneys. But it does block pain from this little pain substance called bradykinin. It does reduce swelling and clean up dead tissue. It also works as what we call a cardiovascular conditioner by breaking down this fibrin so that you don't form abnormal blood clots. Never take this if you're taking blood thinners. That's a really important, obvious. But if you're not and you want to use it on a low dose once a day, as a very often people do that, also to break down scar tissue, help with arterial plaque and getting rid of dead tissue in the body. It also helps to lower this C-reactive protein, which is an inflammatory marker that's linked to cardiovascular disease. We want to have very low levels of C-reactive protein. Otherwise, they suspect inflammation in the body and possibly cardiac issues. So it's always good to have your C-reactive protein checked when you have regular blood work. And it also dissolves and clears out mucus in the lungs. So it's great when we have mucus congestion, very supportive. I'd like to just take a look at one other product that's really good. It's not a digestive enzyme or any type of enzyme, but it's something that really supports our digestion in general, and that's activated charcoal. And how activated charcoal works is as it's processed, each little granule creates these pore-like structures that will adsorb, in other words, carry in and hold through electrostatic forces, gas, and a lot of different toxins. Activated charcoal itself is not absorbed into the system, so now they can be flushed out through the stool. Here's just another, just at these pores. So this is a cross section with the pore up here, and you can see, and this is just under a microscope, an electron microscope, one tiny granule of charcoal that's so fine, it's like powder. So this is how it can adsorb them through these millions of pores. And it can't do it with oily substances, but with drugs and intestinal gas, urea, which can be produced from kidneys not working too well, water, or any water-soluble compound, including your vitamins and minerals, especially. You wouldn't want to take them with food, where especially with your supplement. But using activated charcoal, it can help you for the most part adsorb. See, it's adsorb, hold on to the surface and pull out toxins from the body. Everybody should have activated charcoal in their first aid kit, just in case you get into unquestionable food, have an incident of really bad diarrhea or some type of intestinal infection, and you've got to clear out intestinal, do a digestive cleanse and support your intestinal health. If you've eaten at a restaurant and you're concerned, or you have excess gas and bloating, that we're not talking about, your normal eat this food and it always creates this, but you've eaten something that is very disagreeable to your system. Molds, it can help with molds and food poisoning, toxins due to molds, even bad breath it can be helpful. Occasional acid reflux, it can, if you take activated charcoal with a glass of water, it can absorb the acids and lower your acid reflux. It also helps with alcohol poisoning and hangovers. Although I'm going to say don't take activated charcoal and go on a drinking binge, because it's really the toxins and the aldehyde compounds that it's working on, and you still could really overdo it with alcohol. Although it does tend to support, because there's so many other toxins in mixed drinks, for example. It can also be used to whiten toothpaste or to be made into a paste and put on bug bites, stings, or itchy skin. So just some references for you. Lots that can be helpful with activated charcoal. And Prairie Naturals activated charcoal is actually called Digest Force. Here's Prairie Naturals all-purpose enzyme. This was our very first digestive enzyme. We had brought Force on as this anti-inflammatory enzyme almost 20 years ago now. And then one of the later ones we introduced was Bile Force. This is the one I made about 4 years ago, and it has really become very popular because of the high-fat diets, and people find it very helpful. And here's Prairie Naturals betaine, vegan betaine HCl. So all these formulas are available at Prairie Naturals. I've given you generally what to look for, what could help you, and hopefully provided information that you'll find valuable in supporting your digestion. I would just like to say that you could also look me up. Here's my link tree. If you would like to go and either visit my website, it'll be on there. You'll see a link to click on to get the two stomach acid tests. Also join Prairie Naturals. Oh, I can see there's an error here. I didn't see this. Prairie Naturals ends with .ca. My apologies. Just take off this holistic part right here. A little typo happened. Join Prairie Naturals. Go to their website. Join them on Instagram and Facebook. Very active on Instagram. Look for events through Prairie Naturals. Join their newsletter. Also, would love to hear from you if you have, if you'd like to connect with me, you can do it through my link tree. So thank you very much. Here's the Prairie Naturals company. I just think I'm going to go back and go to the, and actually I'll close down the PowerPoint. That's what we'll do. Okay, here I am. And now Sarah's back with us. What's happened is there might be some questions that you have. Sarah's going to let me know.
Yes, so thank you very much, RoseMarie. And I see a couple questions here from Jackie. She asks, does the time of the day that you eat discourage or encourage the enzymes to digest food? Does shift work affect the work that enzymes do?
Well, that's a very good question. In general, no. If you were on a routine, what affects digestion is more stress. So if you're rushed, you're out of your routine of how you normally would eat, then that could be affected. If you're on shift work and it's an off and on thing, obviously you don't have a steady routine. Digestive enzyme could really help. If you find that you're on shift work and you don't digest the same as you do if you're on a regular 9 to 5 type routine with meals, then just add them in. Add them in when you find that your digestion doesn't work. And the one to start with most likely would be an all-purpose digestive enzyme, a plant-based all-purpose that you take at the beginning of a meal.
Great. And also she has another question. She asks, is there any method to test your own stomach acid?
Yes, those are the two tests that I talked about. If you go to my link tree, which is linktr.ee/RoseMarie.Pierce/. So you just add my name with a dot between the RoseMarie and the Pierce, Pierce. You will just type that into a website. You will get to my link tree, which is like a hub with all of my information on it, including my website, my social media, and those 2 stomach acid tests. I put it right on the top for you, so you can click on that and get the stomach acid test and test yourself. Doctors can test you, but they often don't. They usually just right away go to you giving an acid blocking drug. But it's harmful. It's harmless for you to test your own self at home, especially the Berg test. That's the very first one to do.
Thank you. Another question from Diane. She asks, what can you take to digest proteins if your stomach is sensitive to protease enzymes?
Well, you could use bromelain or papaya enzymes. You could try that, but most likely, given that they have protease in them, it's going to create the same issue. What I would suggest is that you open the capsules and mix them with food. Try, Prairie Naturals Enzyme Force. Take the capsule, open it up, mix it in the food, and eat it right away. If you were to leave it, especially combined with, let's say, a steak, it would start to break down the steak. It would almost melt. The protein would break down. So don't leave it, mix it and eat it. That's most likely the best way. And you could, because you can open the capsule and it's tasteless, you could even do a half a capsule, for example.
Okay. And another question.
We've lost your light.
No, I'm here, but it's just the light is automatic. It's going on and off.
Okay.
So next question. What about the liquid digestive bitters?
Bitters are meant to support the digestive juices, just like lemons do and hydrochloric acid does. So bitters are a good thing to get the juices, especially from the gallbladder liver system. So yes, bitters are something that you can add in. I didn't cover them because they're not in the digestive enzyme line. Bitters are of course, there are herbs and certain vegetables like sorrel and dandelion greens that can be made into liquid and used, because they're very bitter, to stimulate digestive juices, but especially bile. So they support liver function. Yeah, anybody else? Sarah, have a question?
Myself. So that what activated charcoal, yes. That you said that it's good for someone who has occasional acid reflux.
Yes.
So how about if someone has this problem? Does it help all the time?
If they have it all the time or just occasionally?
Yeah, most of the time.
Right. I think then a person needs to look a little bit deeper. I look at Digest Force or any good quality coconut-based activated charcoal as relief, almost like first aid relief. They use it in hospitals still for drug poisoning, though you'd need to take about 50 capsules, and you don't want to use it for that and not go to the hospital. Although if you're 3 hours from a hospital, it would not hurt to be taking, if it's drug poisoning, to be taking activated charcoal. For acid reflux, it's an adsorbent, so it's going to get rid of the acid that's produced there right away, but it's not going to take care of the issue of what's going on. So that's why it's like a first aid remedy, occasional use. For long-term use, you would want to start with the burp test to see, are you really overproducing stomach acid, or do you have an open sphincter on top of your stomach creating issue? Do you have that gas that's pushing the stomach up and it's undigested carbohydrates? What sort of issues are you having with food that could be creating gas, putting pressure on the stomach? Or have you had a blow to the chest? That can also do it. If for example, you were in a car accident and you got hit by a airbag, that airbag could affect the muscles and ribs, and you might need to have some physical therapy type work, see a chiropractor, osteopath, somebody that can help you be sure that that valve was not pushed up through the stomach. So occasional, yes. Long term, go and take a look at what the root cause would be.
Thank you.
Oh, I'd like to say one other thing about that, if it's okay. There's a connection, and I mentioned it briefly, but the issue could be maybe not with the stomach, but maybe with your internal body pH. If your internal body pH is acidic, you might not be able to produce enough acid, because there's a direct correlation, reverse correlation, between your internal body pH being too acidic and your stomach not being acidic enough. So if you've had a really poor diet, under a lot of stress, taking a lot of drugs, you might have a pH imbalance in your internal body fluids. You can use pH paper to check that out. If you go to my website, I talk about that quite a bit, and see, because if you adjust one, it helps the other. If you adjust your stomach acid, it helps your internal body pH, and vice versa. So sometimes it has a different root, but they are connected. And I give long courses on these at Pacific Rim College. I do one on digestion and pH, and one on pH and digestion. Both of those together amount to about 15 hours. That's how much information there. So anybody who's really interested, if you go to that link tree, you will see my long-term courses that I'm giving live or that are online with Pacific Rim College.
Thank you. A few more questions. What is the best time of day to take activated charcoal?
Well, it depends on what the issue is. If you're doing it for a detox, usually at night. So if, for example, you've decided, okay, you want to take activated charcoal, it would be between meals or at night on an empty stomach with a glass of water. For about every 5 charcoal, at least 1 glass of water, unless you have diarrhea. If you have diarrhea, you could decrease the water some, because people do use it to support occasional diarrhea, especially from questionable food poisoning. So really valuable to mop up those toxins and not let them get to the liver. Even if you're taking probiotics. And by the way, charcoal doesn't affect probiotics, but it doesn't affect a lot of good nutrients in food. So unless it's questionable food, take it away from food or at night. So it could be taken last thing at night, first thing in the morning, roughly 5 capsules with a glass of water. Let me tell you a little story. When I first formulated the Digest Force for Prairie Naturals, a store owner was going to Mexico with her family for a wedding. And they all ate the same buffet. They happened to, this couple who own a health food store in BC, they took a bottle of this Digest Force with them. Good idea when you're traveling. And their stomach started rumbling, and they took, I think, actually 3 or 4 capsules each. They happened to tell one of their other family members, and they had a lineup coming to their door all night long, asking for activated charcoal. They were so happy that they had taken a full bottle with them. Good idea if you're traveling. Of course, not many people are traveling these days, but if you happen to be, or as I said, put it in your first aid kit for those times of need.
Thank you. Another question, what can you take to heal a stomach lining?
Stomach lining. Well, it depends on what's causing it. Often, if it's a gastritis or an ulcer, it's H. pylori or drugs. So if you're taking, let's say, if you've taken those NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, those over-the-counter ibuprofen, Motrin, Aleve, those type of drugs, they can cause ulcers. They cause about 2/3 of the ulcers and inflammation. But the other major cause is H. pylori infection. So you first have to get rid of that infection. And that's a whole other talk of getting rid of H. pylori. And I'm sure they could come in and see one of your nutritional practitioners in the store to see what to do to heal an H. pylori infection. So getting rid of the infection is the first thing to do, because that's what's causing the inflammation or the drugs. So doing that first, and then using things like bone broth to get to heal the digestive tract is very useful. L-glutamine is also very useful to support healing. The L-glutamine especially, and the bone broth, which contains L-glutamine and glycine, which are very valuable for healing lining, they act almost directly like salve on a wound. They work directly on the intestinal, the whole gut, including the stomach lining. Also removing foods that are irritants, of course. I would not put hydrochloric acid on a stomach lining that has inflammation in it. Digestive enzymes, well mixed with food, should be okay, as long as they don't cause any stomach acid, stomach irritation, and don't use betaine HCl on an inflamed stomach lining. You will notice it. It'll cause warmth or pain right away. So is that clear? Get rid of the H. pylori infection, or check for it to be sure it's not there. Take away the irritants. Use digestive enzymes to help your food to break down and properly. And then there goes that light again. And then L-glutamine powder, usually a serving or 2 a day, or bone broth. Bone broth, I'm sure you're quite familiar with using bone broth. Anything else come to you, Sarah, to add?
Yes, there's another. I just want to apologize because there was a disconnection. I lost you for a minute, but it came back. I don't know how for audience looks like, but now we are okay.
Oh, good.
So I see a comment. Chris said, "Thank you. The information is very useful."
Good.
And another question, Diane asked, if you have taken HCl but still get heartburn after eating a meal, does that mean you haven't taken enough HCl?
Well, I would suggest that they get my betaine HCl test and check to see how much is the ideal amount for them. And if you still get heartburn, it might be that your valve is, as I showed in the pictures, might be up through the diaphragm, and you might need to have that adjusted and brought back down. So as I said, some chiropractors do it, osteopaths do it, some deep tissue massage practitioners can work with that to readjust the top of the stomach, that the sphincter on the top of the stomach, because if it's pushed up through the valve or adhered to the diaphragm, then it can remain open. Also, the gas level is important. How much gas does a person have? If they have a lot of gas, taking all-purpose digestive enzyme to see if that will remove the gas, taking carbohydrates of all types for a little bit out to see if that reduces the gas. Possibly going on a FODMAP diet is another FODMAP diet.
Yes. Thank you. Another question, someone said, I've noticed after I eat quinoa, some of it comes out in my stool. Is this normal? Should I be taking a digestive enzyme?
Definitely. For some people, quinoa is very much like gluten. For about 10% of gluten-sensitive people, they can't digest quinoa. So it could be that we should never see whole food in our stool, unless you're putting it in and half an hour later you have diarrhea and it's coming out. It could be, but just general digestion, food should not be found in there. You're either not chewing it and or not digesting it. So quinoa, if it's cooked properly, should not come out in the stool for sure. There should be no sign of it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I see Jackie said, thank you, RoseMarie. A very informative presentation on the importance of enzymes and activated charcoal.
Wonderful. Good. Well,
yes.
I'm glad it was enjoyed.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, it was a very informative presentation.
So much there, unfortunately.
It's a lot, yes, a lot of information, but was very well explained. Okay, just a few reminders. I just want to tell about that at the end of this presentation, you will receive a survey link that if you want to get that nutrition box, you need to fill out your mailing address and your nutrition. You will get the coupon about 30 days after this presentation. And also, if you have nutrition question, you can visit your local choices and talk with one of our nutritionists at the store, or email nutrition@choicesmarkets.com. And also, you can subscribe to our newsletter to hear about our promotions, nutrition information, and special events like these webinars. So thank you so much. I think that's 8:33. So I'm going to end the.
Yes, I would just like to say, Sarah, thank you for being with me through this. And
you're very welcome.
Thank everyone for joining us. So happy to have shared this time. And remember, it will be posted on YouTube, on the Choices YouTube channel within about 24 hours.
Yes, and everyone can watch it again.
Yeah, I'll post it as well.
Great. Okay, thank you everyone who attended, and thank you RoseMarie again for a very informative presentation.
Thank you to Prairie Naturals for sponsoring me.
Yes, as well.
Yeah.
And hope everyone have a great night.
Yes. Yes. Blessings, everyone. Thank
Yes.
you.